Hello there, Dr. Dan Miller, Historical Solutions LLC. You're on the 250 River with Dr. Dan. We're going back 250 years ago this week and looking at what I regard as the top 5 events on our journey to American founding, which will be in theory at least, in July of 2026. But right now we're looking at 250 years ago this week in very late March, which takes us back to very late March 1775. We are doing the top 5 from that period. So this is based on my entry for Americanism Redux for the same period, 250 years ago. But as we begin in episode 21, we're only going to keep you just a few minutes, so I hope you're having a great March Madness and wrapping up a wonderful month of March as we head toward further into the spring, shall we say. Again, hope you're doing well where you are. I want to thank our sponsor, our 99% factual 1% fictitious sponsor for this week's episode. Let me make sure I have this correct here, because we're thanking the printer of the Virginia Gazette for this week's sponsorship. The sponsorship is for women. We're talking to the women of the audience. If you're a woman and you're interested in learning how to play the guitar, I'd like for you to contact the printer publisher of the Virginia Gazette. He's going to set you up with somebody who's just in from Europe, a woman as well, who knows how to play the guitar, and more importantly, knows how to teach playing the guitar. So, but she's only interested in female students. So the guys got to sit this one out, or pick up some other instrument, or wait until your teacher comes along. You're not available for this. This is only for the women within the reading audience of the Virginia Gazette. If you want to play a guitar, contact the publisher and the printer of the Virginia Gazette. Thank you for your sponsorship of episode 21 for our unnamed female guitar playing teacher. A 99% fact drawn from late March 1775, 1% fiction. There's no check in the mail to Dan Miller in 2025, 250 years later. So thank you for coming here today. To kick us off, a little bit of a different episode for us today. We're doing kind of 5 plus 1. And I'll tell you, we'll start with our plus 1 in just a second. So I'm not going to hold up my fancy flashing graphic to launch us into the top 5. We'll hold that off for a bit. So you'll just have to confine your disappointment. But this is, last year I said that I wanted Americans to consider celebrating a new national holiday of sorts with the 250th anniversary of the convening of a group they called the Congress in September and October of 1774. That is the start of American Union. Union first, nation second. So when we talk about 250th, and we talk about the birth of the nation and all of that, sure, that's Declaration of Independence time, but the birth of the Union, which really had to happen before the nation, that's 250 years ago, last fall. I wanted you to celebrate that. I think we ought to have that as an annual recognition each year. I've got something else I think ought to be annual, and that's our week this time around in episode 2021. So we're 250 years ago in late March 27th, 28th, somewhere in that neighborhood, and the week leading up to that date or those dates. Very important thing happened. We'll talk about that in our top 5 this week. We'll unfold that. So, but let's begin with what's underneath it. And what's underneath it is daily life. Life that's just been existing and will continue to exist. For better or for worse, and for 100 percentage points in between. So let's start underneath the top 5. And I'll begin with the Taylor branch of Silver Creek in what's now the state of Kentucky, but was then called the area of Kentucky. And I'll point you to a black man named Sam, without a last name, And Sam is crouching over a campfire one night, 250 years ago, late March 1775, crouching over a campfire on Silver Creek, or I'm sorry, on the Taylor branch of Silver Creek. He's there with 30, 40 other guys. They're the trailblazing group led by Daniel Boone, creating a new pathway called the Wilderness Trail that will lead from Central Virginia, the colony of Central Virginia, on out to Kentucky. There's no great way to get there. They're constructing this new path. It's not a road. This new path to get there by marking trees with axes and hatchets and everything else. And William Twitty, who is the enslaver of Sam, William Twitty is in this group that's camping with Boone along the Taylor branch of Silver Creek 250 years ago this week. Sam is poking at the fire, and out of nowhere comes bullets, comes arrows, and comes the shrieking of attacking Shawnee native warriors. Sam is hit instantly, probably dead before he falls over into the fire. 250 years ago. Twitty, his enslaver, shot through the legs, I think it's through the knees perhaps, and starts to bleed out. He'll die in a couple of days. He doesn't go into the fire. He falls over near it. They retrieve him. Boone and company run away in order to save themselves. They come back the next day and construct a little kind of wooden temporary medical space to try to nurse this guy back to health. They bury Sam in the ground along Taylor branch of Silver Creek. And as I said, Twitty dies just a couple of days later. So both the enslaver and the enslaved die within just a day or so of each other. The Shawnee warriors blend back into the nighttime woods. This is not their last calling card in resistance to what Boone and company are doing in making this wilderness trail. Life has been this way ever since the Spanish landed in the New World. What would it be in the 16th century? There's been enslavement. Life has been this way in terms of people occupying, taking, settling the land no matter what else is true ever since folks crossed the land bridge out in what's now Siberian Russia and the state of Alaska. And ever since, both things have been true. So in terms of enslavement, that's pre-biblical for that matter. So at any rate, my point being, this is what's happening 250 years ago in daily life. Let's start our top 5 for 250 years ago this week. John Harvey is the Speaker of the legislature in the colony of Connecticut, and John Harvey writes a letter on behalf of the legislature, the Assembly, they tend to be called in the colonial world, the Assembly. And he writes to the governor, Josiah Martin, and he says, please, and again, this is on behalf of the Assembly, but it's Harvey's letter. Please, Governor, you've got to exercise discretion. You have got to exercise personal judgment. And this latest law that's coming from the British Parliament in London, we ask you, it's really up to you to adjust it and alter it and change it from what it's intended across the Atlantic Ocean. Please change this law on your own accord, because if you don't, the whole thing's going to come down, and the whole thing that we don't want, which is a civil war, is going to start. This is the plea and the request and the recommendation and the demand all rolled into one from John Harvey to Governor Josiah Martin in the colony of Connecticut 250 years ago. It's all come down to this, he says. That's number 5 on our list. Now we're at number 4. Benjamin Franklin writes a letter. To his son, conceived in adultery, William Franklin. Don't really know who the mom is, but we know who the dad is, and it's Benjamin the letter writer for today, 250 years ago. Franklin is somewhere on the Atlantic Ocean sailing west. He's left England. He's headed back home. He's giving up. He might come back to England, but it's clear he's very pessimistic about where things have gone. So what he does is write this massive letter. It just goes on and on and on to William, who's the governor of New Jersey, the imperial, royally appointed British governor of New Jersey. William Franklin is. They're on opposite sides now. William is pro-empire, pro-Britain, pro-parliament, pro-king. Benjamin, the dad, anti by this point. And Benjamin the dad writes this exhaustive letter, page after page, that it kind of lays out what he's been doing since early 1774. So it covers almost a year and a half of time, and he's kind of making his case of I've done everything I could, I tried everything I could, I've done this and gone there, and I just don't think it's going to work, and it looks like we're headed for the worst. He boils it all down to this point. It looks like it's all going to be for the worst, and he closes this lengthy letter with a suggestion from a friend of his, a doctor who's very well connected politically in England, knows all the right people, all the powerful people, all that kind of stuff. And the doctor says to Franklin, tell your friends in Philadelphia, when you get to Philadelphia, give them a message from me, the doctor says. Tell them that there's no hope left. Reconciliation, reform, repair, whichever R you want. The R's are dead. And it looks like it's going to be some kind of war, probably a civil war, within the British Empire, colonist against colonist, colonist against empire, empire against colonist, on and on. That's the Civil War nobody wanted. That's the Civil War we're exactly headed toward any minute. Tell your friends I said that. That's the letter from Benjamin Franklin to William Franklin that he's writing on board ship sailing across the Atlantic toward Philadelphia. Number 3. We're going to run long. I'm sorry. Number 3. Edmund Burke rises in the House of Commons still in England, still in London, that Franklin has left. Edmund Burke stands up in the House of Commons. He's a member, and he delivers a speech today, 250 years ago. This is late March, 1775. You can see the speech online, or you can see the text of the speech. I won't take you through the whole thing, but it's a piece of brilliance. It's a work of genius. And what he does, and however long it would have taken to have spoken these remarks, probably 10, 15 minutes, he lays it all out. Here's how we've gotten to where we are. Nobody wanted this. Nobody's desiring this. And we're down to this. A civil war. He lays it out in 6 categories. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different ways you can organize how things have happened. It's genius. By the way, he includes the Sams of the world in that categorization. So this Sam the enslaved, who we saw tumble over into the fire along Taylor Branch of Silver Creek. Edmund Burke accounts for enslavement as a part of all of this and explains in just a masterful way its effect on things. So he closes this speech by saying, those of us here in England who are affecting and weakening and threatening and damaging the presence of freedom in the New World, of freedom among the 13 colonies, we're doing that to ourselves at the same time. So when you poke that finger in accusation of what everybody else is doing wrong, poke the finger right back at you, because you're doing it wrong to yourself and to one another here in England. It's a great speech. That's number 3. Big graphic time. Number 2. Number 2. Patrick Henry gives a speech on the other side of the Atlantic at almost the same day and the same hour. It's amazing. All this week. Patrick Henry's speech, if you've ever read or bumped into anything that you remember from your school days about the American Revolution, it might be a line, the ending line of this speech, give me liberty or give me death. That's how he closes it all off. His speech is less lengthy than Edmund Burke's, certainly less lengthy than Franklin's letter, written the same week. But in that speech that he closes off with "Give me liberty or give me death," he basically lays out that it's all down to one thing now. There's no hope left. Forget your hope. It's all down to war, civil war. And I say, take me. Where's my gun? Where's my sword? I'm going off to fight. That's what we're left with. So as I said, it's a big week in the American experience, the American River. Number one. It's from the same group that Patrick Henry gave his speech in front of. They're called the Virginia Convention. They're meeting in Richmond, and after they've heard Patrick Henry, after they've done some other things in getting together and trying to decide what to do going forward, they issue a call, and they agree as a group of 95, including Henry, they agree that they're going to have to call upon lawyers, suitors, meaning the people bringing lawsuits, and witnesses. Please stop, suspend all forms of legal resolutions until we ask you to start them again. Suspend them because we're putting everything on hold. Everything's going to go on hold because of the crisis has reached the crisis point. Now, they don't say it in the words that you and I have been talking about, all coming down to civil war, but that's clearly what they mean. So please, until this ends, stop lawsuits, stop legal action against each other. That's part one of the plea. Part two of the plea is to creditors. They ask creditors, the people to whom money is owed, in the colony of Virginia, please, creditors, show some flexibility. Show some understanding. Show some restraint in trying to get back the money you've loaned out for whatever purpose to whatever group of people or whatever individuals. And then third and finally, in this plea, so we're stopping legal action. We're asking creditors to stop collecting their bills. We're asking debtors, the people who owe bills, pay what you can. Just if it's a few coins, just to earn some goodwill, a gesture of goodwill, pay it, toss it toward the bill, toss it toward the debt that you owe. And then finally, there is a fourth piece, I just realized it. Finally, they ask everybody, if you can't avoid taking legal action on whatever legal issue that you think is just so critical, you got to ignore everything we just said. If you can't abide by that, then we issue you one final plea. Ask your neighbor to be the judge. So if you and Bob the neighbor are in dispute, then ask Joe, the other neighbor, to adjudicate, to resolve it, to be the umpire, so we don't have to go into the courts, because the courts, frankly, are just going to suspend the operation. So that's number one, 250 years ago today. Now, real quickly, and I know I've gone over, and I apologize. Why is it important? Why did I say we ought to recognize this week? Before anybody fires a shot at Lexington and Concord, before Paul Revere gets on anybody's horse to say the British are coming, before anybody gets in uniforms and everything else, this is the week that everybody pretty much says it's war. All the other stuff I just mentioned, the big history book stuff, subsequent. The heart and soul of it this week. So, and I'm thinking about words, reduced down to this week, boiled down, compressed, distilled. That's what this week is. It's all gotten down to civil war and nothing else. This is the week to remember that that's where we are. So thanks, everybody. This is the quark, Q-U-A-R-K, the smallest piece of matter that exists. The quark of it all is this week, 250 years ago. I'm Dr. Dan Miller, Historical Solutions LLC. Thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for being part of this show, this podcast, this day. Oh, we have a great week coming up.